Hello everyone and welcome to the 5th episode of The Digital Source. I'm Luke, the head of affiliates at Visualsoft, and I'm joined today by some fantastic guests, and we're going to be discussing the topic of omni-channel marketing, omni-channel retail, everything and anything entailed within that world. So guys, if you'd like to introduce yourselves, Imi?
Hi everyone, so I'm Imi, I'm head of strategy at VS, and my job essentially looks after the end-to-end strategy for any client that we have in the portfolio. So no matter what channel they're on, we build a strategy that connects it all together and try and connect it with a nice creative overarching feel too.
Awesome. Cam?
Yeah, I'm Cam, head of eCommerce at Grenade, have been there for around 3 years, just under, responsible for the direct-to-consumer business, and have been in the industry for around 10 years.
Well, I think the first thing that we need to talk about is what is omni-channel. I think a lot of people out there may get confused between multi-channel and omni-channel, and I just want to set the scene, make sure everybody understands what we're talking about. So let's dive into the definition. Imi?
So I think omnichannel, as you said, kind of depends as well who you're talking to and what lens you want to go down with it. And for me, when it all comes back down to it's customer centric and consistency. So no matter what point the customer actually interacts with your brand across the multiple touch points, there will be a consistent look and feel and message. And it's bringing that together both offline and online where possible.
Absolutely. And I think just from my perspective in particular, the two aren't mutually exclusive either. You know, multi-channel is the, I guess, predecessor to omni-channel. Omni-channel is the natural evolution of a company that is utilizing multiple marketing channels. But Cam, obviously Grenade, you know, one of the fastest growing nutrition brands in the world, certainly in recent memory, how have you guys really defined and looked at omni-channel internally?
For ourselves, I'd almost go to the definition and say multi-channel for us is almost where we sell and what the strategy is, whereas omni-channel for me is almost what are the tactics to sell and where does the blended journey come in. So if we're talking about multi-channel, you know, you start the 3-year plan and you say, here's what we're going to execute and here's where we want to end up. Whereas the tactics are almost, okay, we're launching that MPD, so that omni-channel approach has to be, right, our CRM goes out, so that's our SMS, our emails, our loyals. That's involved in sort of the tactic area would be my clear cut. But as Imi said, they both merge together quite well, don't they? And I don't think you can have one without the other.
I think that's absolutely a critical point, is that multi-channel is not instead of omni-channel, and omni-channel is not instead of multi-channel. Most businesses will, to some degree, leverage multiple marketing channels. That puts them very much in that kind of multi-channel operating zone. But it's when we then overlay that with our strategic vision of how do we get in front of the customers in the correct way, how do we bring all of that together. Cam, you made a really good point there about your CRM and data being at the heart of it. I think putting the customer in the middle of the channel journey is really, for me, a visual way of saying this is the difference between omni-channel and multi-channel. Tell us a little bit more about kind of that CRM piece and how you've put that in place.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think to your point, the customer has to be at the forefront of this focus, right? Because I think we'd all sit there and go, we don't really want to deal with that customer, or we don't want to be on that platform. But ultimately, that's where the customer wants to be. So from a Grenade perspective, the website has to be unique value proposition. And we've got to deliver to that customer something above and beyond. You know, if we were to say, let's be a pure play e-commerce channel, we're not going to beat Amazon. But what we can do is offer experience above and beyond. And if we say, there's the customer, here's what they'd like to achieve, let's make it special and let's add that almost reason why to that. You know, we're Grenade, we understand that best, take the data, portray Grenade well, and you've got that omni-channel approach. But you almost, I think on other channels you cannot do that, so it's making sure you take advantage of the differentiation point of own website with customer focus.
So I think for a lot of them, you know, when I work with more of the SME type, we typically then will see them go from like actually wanting to get into multi-channel because they're seeing their aspirational brands be there already. So if you're in fashion, you're seeing, well, I want to be the next ASOS. I love how they're working there. But then it will be, okay, how do we actually pare that down to what is right for you? And sometimes we do see then that a brand will want to jump into a lot of different channels really, really quickly. They'll see one that's really hot at the moment, for example, TikTok. But it's coming back to asking a question of why. have you nailed the core channels where your target audience are? And then we can move you into the next one so you can have it not spread too thin, because I think that's what a challenge for SMEs typically is just becoming a bit too thin. There's different challenges naturally, but you can see where you want to be going, but it's just continuously asking why and move forward right.
I jump on the back of that. I totally agree. And I think something I talk to the team about a lot is you hear the coin of best practice thrown around. And like you mentioned there, you know, ASOS, Zara, that's best practice for them, you know, and we've got to look at it from a Grenade perspective and say, that's the landmark, you know, that's where we want to get to, but in our very own way. And I think if you take the element of the brand and say, that's how you portray it to the point, you know, you see our sleeves in Tesco, Sainsbury's, you go, that's Grenade, because we sort of done that in our specific way. And I think it's so important, SMEs, as you mentioned, when they go into that journey, I'd almost say smaller channel mix, but done well and with intent and purpose, as opposed to a wide pool where you sort of, okay, TikTok shop's not working today, our listings aren't quite correct, and then go to Amazon, your A+ content doesn't align with your website, and you're thinking, just do a couple of bits well, go with the flow of the river, almost go with an 80-20, and I think that would be the best way to dip your toes in a sense.
I think absolutely, and you've nailed a critical point there, which is, I think with a lot of smaller businesses, whether it's SME or not, they look at this mountain ahead of them, which is, we want to get into multi-channel, we want to do omni-channel, and it's a perception of we have to do everything immediately, and that isn't true at all. I think picking a certain number of channels that you understand, that you know your audience exists on, and doing them really well before you just go out and do everything is probably the single best piece of advice that I can give. I'm really curious, Cam, just to kind of press you a little bit on, how did Grenade find their way?
It's a really good question, and I jumped to a personal story myself. So I came into the Grenade sort of ecosystem around 3 years ago, and I remember coming in and all the accounts were flying. So you're looking at sort of B2B, grocery, convenience, flying. You look at Amazon, flying, and then sort of had this web P&L right at the bottom saying, why is that not moving at all? And a lot of my job to be done was almost what Imi mentioned. There was sort of speaking to the key stakeholders and almost taking them on that journey, almost like a customer, you know, they're your customer internally, to say, here's what we're going to build. We're not going to disrupt the Amazon ecosystem. We're not going to disrupt B2B. In fact, let's flip that on its head. And we know from the data that's coming out, you look at TikTok, you look at Meta, there's a lot of digital interaction even prior to B2B purchase. So unless the guys were clear on the touch points, unless they were clear on how we'd sort of push that forward, it would have been a big no-no, because the business is scaling. The last thing you want, especially with a B2B mindset, is to go, let's disrupt everything and let's start to PR buyers off. You know what I mean? It's that real hard balance, but getting it right. I think once the seeds start to sow, you see those green shoots, and then everyone's like, oh, we believe you, right? We'll come along for the journey now. And thankfully we're here. But it does take time and a lot of patience, and the why, explain the why, you know, I think is really, really key.
I think that trepidation's absolutely to be expected as well, especially in the scenario you laid out there where actually the website wasn't the first entity. It was this bolt-on that came kind of second. And the worry of, are we going to disrupt that wider piece that we've got that's working so well? But actually, if done correctly, the website can be a real confidence builder for customers as well. You know, they find the product on Amazon, they check out your website. Oh, wow, there's a lot of information on here. There's a community. And then equally, when they go into the wider piece, maybe engaging with your social media platforms, your email marketing, and they get a sense of, this isn't just another nutrition product that's on the market. This has got a spirit, it's got a soul to it, and there's a story here. And you wouldn't get that without your website being the kind of the wagon that's driving that forward and containing all that information. That's really interesting. There are maybe a lot of people watching in a similar boat whereby the website is maybe worrisome in the face of this wider kind of marketplace piece that's already doing really well. But I would say, if done right, I agree, it can be a real bonus, a real boon to the business. But obviously some things to avoid and be careful of on that journey to make sure that it isn't disrupted.
Absolutely. And I'd also say, I think one thing that I found almost invaluable was spending time with the heads of sales from other departments and go, this is what you appreciate, this is what would benefit you. And, it's that sort of to me, to you mentality. Yeah. If you divide and conquer, you're going to scale far quicker than if you go, the website's doing this and Amazon's doing this. It goes back to that omni-channel presence. You sort of take that to a business ecosystem as opposed just D2C.
Yeah,
agree.
And I think that's really interesting from our perspective as well, because naturally we aren't part of that internal Grenade ecosystem, for example, and the same be said for a lot of our clients, but we try to, I guess, coach our clients into treating us as an extension of that internal team. And I think this applies to all agencies that are maybe included in that mix. But Imi, this is kind of your bread and butter. You are the linchpin at Visualsoft that deals with our clients on a strategic level, on a business level. How does that work with kind of you and your team, and how you integrate into those conversations that maybe are happening within the client's business?
Yeah, it's a really sort of playing a long game with a client. You want to come in, of course, make immediate impact. You let them see you as that value piece. But the long term is really building the relationship with the client on a one-to-one. So you do need to put in a lot of time. But naturally, you can get a little overwhelmed if you're talking to 8 different account directors from 8 different channels, plus also then going into your in-house marketing. So sometimes distilling it down can then you can talk more about the top line, take a step back. And that's really what I find very exciting when I talk to a client, is actually understanding their bigger picture and trying to then see how can we assist you there. So if I'm talking about this is what we're up to on your PPC and your affiliate and how they're like clicking together, and I know that in-house they're doing more email, well, great, because what I can do is I can pick up some of the data, say from affiliates, and I can help you.
Cam, I really want to dig into a little bit. How do you guys do all of this with such a lean team in-house? What's that been like? What are the challenges been?
Do you know, it's a really good question. So I started off in my journey sort of under 10 or so years ago. I came in as an apprentice with a company called Coon Recon, sold cookware, and I think the first thing I noticed was, goodness me, we've got a load of Amazon returns. We need to start an eBay refurbishment store here. Started to get into that, and then I thought, Christ, this would be good for the website. And then you start to touch Amazon. For me, I did that all sort of end to end as a one-man band, and then 2 before I left. It's really important for me, especially with the warehousing side of things, team element, to understand what you're trying to implement. And when I first came into Grenade, I had a bit of a succession plan from the prior head of ecom, and it was, we need a team of 10. I think, well, that's best practice. So I had this big best practice laid out structure, 10 people coming into the team. And I thought to myself, we don't need 10 people. We don't have an e-commerce manager, but we've got an SEO and affiliate specialist. Hold on a second, let's taper this back a bit. And I had to have, I'd say, at the start of my Grenade journey, some quite difficult conversations. Say, I know you've been brought in to do X, Y, and Z, but in order to scale this channel, we need to almost dim down the KPI set, simplify it. I've got an almost 7 KPI Bible that I stick by in terms of my core set, few over on the acquisition side, few on the retention side. And to be fair to the guys, absolute credit to them, I suppose in terms of a small team, you've got to understand what you're trying to achieve and have people that are on board with that journey. Because I suppose internally as a brand, last thing you want is someone turning around and going, I just do paid media. That's my job. However, as we've scaled from the sort of 4 to 10 million plus on the website, that's when you start to say, we've had some great conversations with you guys, say, hold on a second, our affiliates is not where it needs to be. Let's apply the powers of big and small. You guys are the specialists on that side of things. So let's go out to the experts. And I think keeping your team robust drives what you want to drive, but you can't be sort of, egotistical is the wrong word, but I felt like at certain points I want to keep this team tight, and I thought, to scale now, we need to drop the hatchet.
Certainly, I really like that concept of we do need to wear more than just one hat in order to understand omni-channel. Even if you are a channel expert, really siloed into just one particular channel, the breadth of experience that you can then bloom if you learn other elements of omni-channel, it just makes it so much more robust and more valuable. And I think potentially we've just described the strategy role at Visualsoft. How have you found the kind of, I guess, working with varying different team sizes, levels of knowledge, and your job to kind of pull all of that together and make sure it's working?
You've got to kind of wear multiple hats, understanding where solutions can be and be quite agile with that. And then that sort of has really progressed in how I grew up through affiliate and then came into strategy, because you still have to find solutions really quite rapidly. It's actually sort of a bit of a balancing act. Like I said, being that sort of glue between the channels.
I think it's that agility that's the key, isn't it? You mentioned about kind of moving resources around and making sure that the clients aren't just focused entirely on one thing, because I think, Cam, back to your point of kind of, if we do get too stuck in, well, we have a plan, it's hire 10 people, let's do these 10 things. If we're not able to adjust and adapt to that on the fly, then certainly omnichannel can become difficult. But I think just hitting targets can become difficult in general.
Naturally, and I almost feel like a good e-commerce team or good D2C team is almost like a great relay team. You know your role, whether that's almost finishing off the campaign and delivering the KPIs, or kicking it off and sort of portraying that vision to a team. You've got to have that shared unity. And for myself, you sort of, bigger teams, the bigger the team you go into, I experience it sometimes talking to this sort of bigger corporates, and you go, you're great at talking about your strategy. Can you actually do your strategy?
Maybe that leads us really nicely into what I think is potentially the backbone of all of this omnichannel piece, the data and the tools. And I really want to, Cam, just kind of dive onto you a little bit with this, because you've got first-hand experience with implementing this from the ground up. But what would you say on that kind of foundational piece of data, CRM, and the various bits of software that you guys have looked at? What's that journey been like for you?
Not simple, to be absolutely honest, not simple. And I think everyone's been round the houses in terms of, this will solve your problem, this will solve your problem. You guys will get numerous emails come through, daily basis, do X in however many months, and you look at it, and I think the more experience you gain, you think, I'm not too sure about that. But I cast myself back to when I first came into Grenade, and there are a few core KPI sets I looked at. First one was, what's our lifetime value? What's the customer worth to ourselves? What's the purchase frequency like? So that's 6-month recruitment rate, i.e. each month on average for 6 months, are we acquiring enough customers to keep that up? And then if I cast myself to the other side of the coin, are we getting enough of these customers? Yes. We've got LTV? Yes. So what's our ROAS and what's our CAC? And just merging those two together with your profitability outline, you can get amazing things to happen. And that's where we first started, and albeit very basic premise, but just really understanding what we could spend on acquisition, justifying it, rationalising it was important from the get-go. I think now, to your point, Luke, we got to a position where we think, well, actually, everything's scaled quite nicely, and we turned this from £1 million business to a multi-million pound business. Where's the next layer of data for the next level of growth? And that's when you've got to look at your CDPs. We've got a Metri at the moment, and that tool is really useful for me to say, that's where we acquire the best customer. If I look at my 30-day attribution window, I might go, blooming heck, we're losing money, turn the campaign up. But then that lag measure of the CDP to say, that's working really well. And I think it's really important not only to look at the lead measures, you miss so much if you don't look at the lag measures and what's going on almost behind the shop, in the stock room downstairs. You got to dig down and go, that's insight. Let's bring it to the top level in the forefront.
I think every conversation I've had in the last 12 months has ultimately boiled back to the challenges around data. From a simplistic level of those businesses that maybe once upon a time relied on Google Analytics. We've now got Google Analytics 4. We've talked about it so much and how fundamentally different it is. We've talked about some of those market leading solutions, about tying all of your data together, which are maybe more relevant for businesses more mature in their omnichannel journey. But it's a really difficult challenge right across the landscape, this data piece. Even as simple as making a decision about, you mentioned a campaign there, something as simple as a paid search campaign. Do we turn it off? Do we put more money into that campaign? And a lot of businesses really struggle with, well, how do we make that decision? Because we don't trust the data that we've got, because the way we trust the data has changed, and because we have attribution windows and lag times that maybe the software we're using just doesn't account for currently. But Imi, from a strategic perspective, you guys see all of the data, all of the data that we can get our hands on. What would you add to that piece?
To be honest, I'll go back to exactly what Cam said at the start. It's not easy at all. There is so much that now we have to look at. I think really though, to me, it starts to also like boil down to what are those core metrics that are important to the client, because for the client to actually succeed and grow, we need to understand what a success actually looks like for them. And then that is then our sort of piece that we will have to keep coming back to as our cornerstone to say, okay, we've made X amount of revenue year on year go up. That's great. However, because of maybe the ROAS target, that's meant that this hasn't grown as much. So we can also have much more progressive conversations with the client to also understand where are we wanting to grow.
And it's all about profit ultimately, isn't it? So it's understanding profit. And I think it's worth, again, for those businesses that are maybe listening and are thinking, well, we're not on this journey yet, but we're thinking about going on it. And you might be in a position where you're trying to figure out what channel is profitable and what channel isn't. So way away from the omni-channel, even multi-channel approach. And it is more difficult is the answer today than it was a few years ago. No matter what the strategy is or conversations we have, for me, if you are at the point where you're investigating things like profitability, CAC, ROAS, LTV, anything like that in a more intelligent way than simply is my X campaign working or not, then you must look at the software and you must invest into that software. It will pay dividends as time goes on. What would you kind of give for advice in terms of where you do run into those problems where something just doesn't quite connect up or doesn't quite get you the data that you want? How have you guys tackled some of those hurdles?
I think it's understanding what you can play with, not being afraid to make bold decisions. And we had, I think it was last Black Friday, some really challenging sort of business numbers to hit. I sat down with my MD and I remember brainstorming this, how do I rationalise a 3-month CLTV? Took the spreadsheet out, we looked at our lag measures, we said 56-day repurchase window. Okay, we can get 2 purchases this Black Friday, and we dropped ROAS, break even, and we had the best Q4 we've had in sort of history of Grenade.com perspective. And I think it was just bit of trust, bit of leaning into it. But to your point, like you can't make those decisions without data. If you're going into it, you come to the end of the month and your P&L looks all over the place, and that's the last thing FD, MD want. You've got to have trust in your business model.
And I think it is quite scary when we're looking at these tools that are available. Some of these tools are quite expensive, they're quite complicated. Maybe you don't have the in-house expertise to implement the tool. But again, reinforcing all of those points, without those tools, we cannot understand the outcome. We cannot get to a true omni-channel perspective. And so I would say anybody who's starting out on that journey, you must commit to getting that data right and having the right tools in place, and be willing to change them as you run into challenges that maybe the current tool just simply cannot address. So we've talked a lot about omni-channel, the challenges, the tools, the data, everything in between. But we haven't touched on perhaps one of the more recent developments, the social community and user-generated content aspect of this, which maybe, I know I said that the data and tools piece was potentially the biggest challenge, but it would be slightly remiss of me maybe to think that this isn't also a huge area of challenge. We have everything from Facebook and Instagram, Pinterest, TikTok is obviously quite new on the block, but making huge waves. And within all of that, we've also got influencers, community, and all of that user-generated content that we all have even less control of, potentially. I guess going to you first, Imi, what have you seen in that kind of social space, and how have your clients and your team kind of navigated this within the world of multi-channel and omni-channel?
So firstly, it's massively popular at the moment. It became like obviously a real big sort of buzzword, I'd say, like a few years ago.
Yeah.
And then it became how do we even track this? Because currently we're only looking at likes and shares. And, that was naturally where things like affiliate was able to sort of step in, be able to provide a bit more tracking. So what I then really have found, particularly in the last year or so, is with this movement more towards having TikTok and seeing social as an overall entity of social commerce, that's also how you're then controlling your influencers to a degree. Yeah. When you're using influencers to really try and guide them a bit more in terms of these are our brand guidelines, make sure that something is actually going out that feels very authentic to the influencer, but also ultimately authentic to your brand. So they're going to always look for that authentic piece. Then distrustful of using a big influencer and they're much more trusting of using those micro influencers. So like the 10k sort of to 100k mark is really like a nice sort of sweet spot, because you've got a lot of engagement there. Something as well that I've definitely seen is how you actually start to activate that community is really important. So one of my clients, we did a campaign through summer and really capturing the whole like Taylor Swift Eras tour hype. But when she hit Europe, with this client, we spotted that their community overall resonates with Taylor Swift's community. So could we actually activate some of our influencers in this space? We utilised affiliate to actually be able to track this. But what we then found was that we could layer in a lot more extra strategy that the influencers could connect to if they wanted to. Style guides were great as well. So we started to see this multi sort of channel effect really working together, but ultimately feeling very holistic, very consistent. So it goes back into the omni-channel.
And I think social as a channel, perhaps more than any other channel, is essentially a complex web of other sub-channels. You mentioned Meta there, Instagram, but YouTube. All of these channels have wildly different use cases, wildly different audiences and demographics of their own right. I think definitely I would agree with identify the most relevant social media channel for you. Where is your audience currently and where can you find them, and activate that and do it really well. Cam, you guys must do a lot with influencers and social in general.
A lot, yeah. I think the best relationships are with those sort of 10 to 15k followers to say, let's scale together. You know, they've got a purpose and motivation to utilise your brand, but they also resonate with the brand. Best form of UGC, in my opinion, is customer talking to a customer, because we're brand advocates. You know, we're employed by the brand. As much as I've loved Grenade, it's a purposeful product. I would like someone else to tell someone else that it's important to them. So yeah, a big part of that being authentic, and for ourselves, especially in MPD periods, making sure we pick the right group to say they're going to amplify that message for us and they're going to resonate with the audience that we're targeting from a sort of interaction perspective. It's not going to come across as a been sent this, got to do it, on to the next. It's a I'm truly engaged. And I think we've got to feel that as a brand. It's almost like ChatGPT. You give it a rubbish prompt and you're like, oh, it's giving me a rubbish answer. And like, well, yeah, you need to be really clear on what you're trying to achieve here in a sense. So that would be what I'd sort of say about that one in a nutshell.
I think that's absolutely critical, is the briefing process. I think you're absolutely right. I really love that analogy of the ChatGPT prompt. You know, if you give an influencer the objective of simply try and sell this product for me, influencer marketing can be that, but maybe not in the most direct way. It's not a case of setting all of your influencers the objective of selling your product. I think that is where you're setting yourself up for disappointment.
In the sort of Battersea area in London, there's a lot of like there's a Nike shop and Adidas shop. You know, you've obviously now got like Gymshark coming into the ring with having their sort of in-store pieces. But being able to actually connect and reward the community, I think, is then where we're also starting to see that movement of like activating influencers better. So in that sort of Battersea area, you've got a high concentration of all of these brands, but then also them wanting to talk to the community by having in-person events, which then naturally attracts more influencers who will then be doing content and wanting to share. Actually going to where those communities are who align with values that are aligning with your value then immediately brings authenticity.
Also about understanding what your customer wants and what your brand's about. There was a great example of kind of the anti-omni-channel approach. So it was a TK Maxx essentially committed to, they don't want to join up their community. They don't want to join up their stock between stores because they see it as a treasure hunt. And if they did move to an omni-channel setup, it would dilute that experience of going to a TK Maxx and trying to find those hidden gems. Cam, just to dig into what is authenticity for Grenade? How do you guys make sure that you stay authentic on these various communities and social channels?
I go back to exactly what we talked about at the start of this, which is understand your brand, understand the people within the brand. We partnered with around 6 months ago a run club called Rock Up in Birmingham. Al, our founder, sort of CEO, lived in Birmingham, founded the brand in Birmingham. You got that sort of 0121 element. That felt so authentic to us. And also the fact that these guys had the motto, Grenade in itself, our USP is the best tasting protein bar. We're so aware that sort of your everyday hero, it could be someone that's climbing mountains or doing high rocks in, best time. But it could be NHS nurse who's working sort of 10, 12 hours a day. And you're taking that product as a, Christ, I'm busy. I need something as a need state here. So it's like everyday heroes is the phrase we sort of encapsulate. And the more we can do to be authentic to that, as opposed to going, oh, there's someone in the gym eating a protein bar, it just doesn't feel too sort of authentic. So go back to answer the question, I'd say it's got to resonate with us. Does it feel right as a brand to be doing this? And do the people that are pushing our product, do they feel right? And I think within sort of 5-10 minutes of talking to an ambassador, an influencer, you're going to hit it off with our customers, or actually, do you know what? You'd be great for another brand, but you're not quite right for ourselves.
Yeah, I think that's so important, especially when we look at social and influencers and omni-channel, that we can easily get overwhelmed with the thought of just making sales and having that as your number one KPI. How many have we sold? X, Y, and Z. But actually, this is one area where having values first is probably the right approach in most cases, because if it resonates correctly with values, I think the sales will look after themselves. You don't need to KPI on sales first. Yes, it's going to cost something to activate that. It might be a gift, it might be a collaboration, but these are ultimately mutually beneficial partnerships that you're trying to set up. It's not essentially a sales vehicle, and I think that's where a lot of businesses go wrong with influencer marketing.
Yeah, and I suppose to the point there, if you're going into it with a bit of inauthenticity in a sense of like, right, we just need to sell more product, well, like that message is going to come across in their campaign, the content. So it's just, to your point, making sure that job to be done is give the customer a space to engage with someone that represents our brand well. There's a lot of them that are sort of, the founder leads the message, and luckily enough at Grenade, Al, again, I go back to our founder, that's his sort of life. He pushes further. He's always in the gym, always looking to optimize, and providing we take that why, pump it into our teams and then pump it out, you're going to hit the nail on the head. But it's just making sure you don't deviate from that, to your point, core brand principle, really.
I want to talk about that bold branding. And I think Grenade embody that. That's such a core principle. I can recognize that brand from 1,000 miles away. But how important is bold branding?
I don't think you can have successful omni-channel in my mind without almost meaningful brand. And the reason I say that, there's Simon Sinek, who I'm sure you guys have heard of. It's that golden circle model where it's almost like, what are we selling? We're selling protein bars. How do we do it? Maybe that's omni-channel, but you bring that why to the forefront. And especially for ourselves, the reason I say you've got to have a strong brand, and I don't mean, look, we've got the tanks, got the hot air balloons. It really represents us well. But what that does do for us is allows us to say there's a competitor brand in the market, or we've got someone that's pumping TikTok, protein bars out like crazy. We stay true to Grenade, and that's something we will always have versus our competitors. I think if you keep sort of that USP, that point of difference, and even to Amazon annotations, call out your USPs as a brand, keep it consistent across the board, you can't go far wrong. It's just then when you've got an unaligned team, someone does start to go Wild West, you can't allow that to happen, because that brand has to be at the forefront of your sort of decision making. And does it feel right? Does it feel authentic? Does it feel Grenade? Yes, it does. If it doesn't, we've really got to go back and hash that out and make it sort of fall into that brand guideline, because it's just consistent across the board,
I think that's really super interesting, because I think a lot of clients, a lot of businesses get super focused on the look and aesthetic of the brand, and is it bold and is it going to grab attention? And they often miss that it's not really the boldness of the colours or the fonts, although yes, to an extent in certain situations that might play a part. It's more, what do you stand for, and why are you different to everybody else in the market, and what is it that makes me want to buy from you as opposed to one of the 100 other people that are selling a similar product. This is what we're ultimately tasked to try and differentiate, to help our clients establish that brand. What would you add to that conversation?
The brands that I see really succeed clearly are also distributing that brand guideline. So whether it is your font, we need to make sure that is also represented on, say, your Amazon storefront. If we can, we want to make that as close to the rest of your branding as possible. For example, massive brands like Adidas are able to do this no matter what touch point they're at. And that makes you then feel very committed and trusting of that brand. So if we have the brand guidelines, that then helps with your copy. It helps with us actually brainstorming with you, because we're essentially speaking the same language back to you. So then we can become not just sitting as your strategic guide across the table. We start to sit together, and then that becomes much more of like cohesive marketing overall.
And I think it's really important to kind of call out that if you feel like you don't know what your brand is, if your purpose is simply to sell, then take some time to either work with a team like ourselves or work with your in-house team, get all of your key stakeholders sat around the table and try and figure out what it is to be you. You know, what is your purpose? And if you're an established business that's been going for a long time, I guarantee your customers do have a sense of who you are. Even if you don't, ask your customers, and from there you can start to build out what your brand looks like and what the messaging is going to be when you do then start to look at omnichannel. I definitely think you have to be careful stepping into multi-channel and omnichannel before you've done that piece of work, totally, because it will cause you infinite problems further down the line. So I think that's really critical, and brings us to the closing question, which is, what do we think is next necessarily for omnichannel, multi-channel, or any kind of combination thereof?
So I think the next version of omnichannel is actually how brands are going to be venturing into apps and using also layers of automation and AI. With apps, what I'm seeing more is that people obviously want to be connecting closer to your brand, and using an app immediately creates a bit of that closed user group, because you can connect straight to them. The best apps also collect a lot of data on their users at sign-up, so that then you can immediately take that for segmentation. But I see apps as well as becoming the vessel for also engaging with the community and having an actual process behind it of understanding how we'll connect your store, your website, and your app ultimately, so that no matter where I'm actually shopping, it will be seamless and integrated, and the app can then be used to do things such as exclusive drops. It's a great way to sort of clear old stock as well, but make it app exclusive, talk to, say, different segments. And then, like I said, you've got AI to sort of layer in those extra bits of personalization for them.
I also think that brand-to-brand partnerships are a big thing on the horizon. I think a lot of the super brands are doing it, and it's starting to now distill down into the smaller businesses, but partnering up with like-minded businesses to find that where your communities cross over and where the same people are shopping with two, I guess, complementary retailers or complementary brands.
AI is great if it's saving you efficiency, but where it's not great is offering that sort of humanistic aspect to your customer experience. You know, no one really wants to be greeted by a robot. We all know how frustrating it is when you pick up the phone, you know, call the bank, and it's like, press one. It's like auto responding. It's like someone's just taken £100 off my card here. I need a chargeback or something. You know, you want that instant support. I think the biggest focus for me within my team is making sure we stay authentic to almost an old school style experience. Now it's you need an online store, you need an app, and at some point, you know, 5 years, I'd say AI will be a need state. Where we differentiate for us is that sort of mystique element to it, but the customer experience. So Jack, who works in our CX team, I want him outreaching to customers directly, picking up conversations with them. You know, talked to a product team yesterday, could we chuck a mystery bar in the box? Five Guys, a great example of that. You know, you've got your small fries tub and they chuck way too much, and you're looking at it thinking, goodness me, they're a bit generous. It's a marketing trick. You know, they're constantly telling you we'll give you more, and I think in sort of 2, 3, 4 years that'd be more important than ever. I really do.
I think that's such a nice kind of closing take as well, which is we could talk about personalization for another hour, but actually that's a different type of personalization. It's not just knowing my name and that I am who I am on a different device. It's also that you're willing to say thank you for making that purchase, and we're going that extra mile for you. I love the idea of that kind of mystery bar that gets put in the order. Fantastic. The Five Guys analogy, yes, that was fantastic when everybody just thought they were getting more chips, but actually it's a tactic. Fantastic. Well, guys, I think we've covered some really great topics there. I think there's a lot that hopefully our audience is going to find really useful. This will all be available, but thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you.
Thank you. Cheers.
Cheers.